Hello, Chris, and hello, everyone. Welcome to the last transmission. How are you doing, Chris?
Yeah, good. How are you?
All right. A bit of a panic just before we started because my camera didn't want to play, but it is doing now. I think we've had an hiccup with that, but we're all good. And a great week so far. No complaints. And have you been busy?
I'm always busy, yeah. It's getting a bit warm, isn't it? I shouldn't complain in April, but in this room now, it's getting during day, it's getting a bit. Yeah, I've not got, of course. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been working from home long. Well, I've been working at home obviously for a few months now, but it's going to be my first summer in here, I think. But I'm hoping it's not because I don't think I could cope with it.
We're going to get a bit of air conditioning or a fan in or something. But enough of that. Let's have a look. We've got. Going on for 60 people in chat already. And I'm really pleased with our guest tonight that we're managing to speak to, Andy, because of the short we put out in week that Andy kindly put together for us. Brilliant. And,
Yeah, Andy was saying it's done really well. A lot of views on it, a lot of people commenting on it. And it's nice. It's, as we said, during the making of it, when you and I were chatting, it's rare to get, a witness. I mean, sometimes people will complain that you've got someone you deem someone from the forces or the military or someone with, I don't know, any sort of non-civilian background, a more credible witness. But in this case, he is, because it was actually you could consider him just a normal witness because it was part of his job.
Yeah.
So
I would agree, and I've known Andy quite a long time now, and I know you've known him a good while, and. I shouldn't say this, but he reminds me of Linny a little bit. Probably don't swear as much. Well, I know he don't, but he just says it as he sees it, and what you get is just a straightforward answer as best he can give it, which is usually a good answer, So before we jump to Andy, shall we have a look who's in chat?
Yeah.
Or the limited numbers that I can see. So we've got Jojo, Mike Disabled Welshman, Ginge, Karen Bierman, Steph, Declan Walsh, Dragonborn. We've done Steph, haven't we? Let's have a look. Sober Carper, Magsu, Simon Riley, Steve Tees, Awake. And that's as much as I can see. That's as much as I can see at the moment, guys. We'll return to it, no doubt. Lee Roscoe's in Rivington Pike, and the bill, the bill. How apt. I wonder who that is. 999. And evening all is just said, so that's funny. I hope you're going to behave yourself, and yeah, all good. So let's do it.
Yeah, I'll bring Andy in.
Hello, Andy.
Hello.
How are you doing?
How you doing, mate?
Hi, Chris and Paul.
Yeah, well, good to see you, and thanks for agreeing to come on. I mean, like we said before, I can't say enough. I know we're just going to get an honest, straightforward answer. And you're not going to dress it up to be paranormal if it's nothing to do with paranormal.
No, not at all. No.
Andy? Did you have to think about it for quite a while before you decided that you were going to? I mean, it's not a big. People say it's not a big endeavor. It's not a big thing to put an encounter of your own out with a background like yours. But did you have to think about it before you did it?
Not really. No, I don't think so. I've had a couple of experiences that, I mean, the sort of werewolf stakeout of you, as you've called it, was fairly mundane, really. I mean, it was just that the complainant, the lady that lived in the farmhouse, she was really, really upset and concerned, and she had heard this howling. It was weird. It was weird. I mean, whether that howling came from a cryptid or whether, as I think, it came from the local farm lad that lived down the lane, so to speak. Yeah. But I don't know. It was just a strange experience, and it was an eerie place as well. Particularly, sort of, it was off all of the main roads. It was about half a mile from the nearest main road. It was completely black, black as black.
Really? Well, before we get into that, because I mean, they're not going to be challenging questions. You know what we're like. Well, I just know that you noted local farm lad, but you did say that the dog found the scent and it went opposite direction to where he lived.
Yeah, that was really strange. That was the night when something banged. I think it was like the side door.
Can I stop you, Andy? Because I've set you off on it. Now, obviously, our listeners will want to hear from the beginning, it's my fault that. But can we start at the beginning with you? And let's get back to 1970s and your first kind of touch on something of an unexplained nature?
What got me sort of really interested in the genre was it was 1973, 74. So I'd be sort of 11 or 12. And I think it was either July or August of that year. I was out with my mum in the garden. She was gardening. We lived in Grantham in Lincolnshire. We saw this, I can only describe it as this silver triangle that was I mean, we used to get a lot of aircraft over Grantham because we were sort of in the midst of a lot of the RAF air bases. Vulcans used to fly over regularly from Waddington and Scampton and from up the road here at Finningley. They're always in the air. So I've always been interested in aircraft. Even as a young lad, my dad used to take me to air shows and what have you. So I knew what was what in the sky sort of thing, even at that age. This particular evening, this triangular shaped object was moving slowly through the sky towards us. We sort of lived on the sort of outskirts of the town near the fire station. And it stopped. I don't know what altitude it was at, 1,000 feet, something like that. But it had a pulsating front end on it. It almost, from what I recall, having like a globe on the front end of this triangular silver triangle. It stopped in midair and just hovered there for 5 or 6 minutes. Then it turned in a 90 degrees and then started heading away towards Newark very, very slowly. It wasn't quick at all. My father at the time, he was a serving police officer and he was on the 2 to 10 shift that evening. And he was working in the inquiry office at Grantham Nick. My mum, she was really panicky. She went and telephoned him. Took her ages to get through. He eventually called back saying that the switchboard at the Nick had gone absolutely crazy because there were literally dozens of people reporting this sighting. Apparently, aircraft was scrambled from I think it was either Coningsby or Cottesmore, to take a look at whatever this object was that people were reporting. I don't know. I can't recall what the outcome of that was.
No.
I also understand that police patrols at the time followed it from Lincolnshire to Nottinghamshire, where they sort of couldn't keep pace with it, apparently, or whatever. But yeah, that got me sort of started in it. You know, I became interested. It was all in the local newspaper, the Grantham Journal. I think it was made front page news, and as I say, dozens of people witnessed this, whatever it was.
And when you said it turned, did it just turn on its own axis then?
Yeah, it seemed to.
Yeah.
As I say, it was probably, I don't know, about 1,000 foot, something like that, 1,500 feet. And it just, went and then slowly moved off towards Nottinghamshire.
And like you said, you're familiar. You've seen.
I was petrified as a little kid. I mean, it really, really disturbed me because I don't know. There was just something about it that was really disturbing.
How big do you think it was, Andy?
I've no idea. I don't think it was I don't know. I wouldn't like to say because I was 11, 12, something like that. It would be wrong for me to say, it was a UAP, UFO, whatever you want to call them these days. But this, whatever it was really, really strange.
It's interesting, though, Andy, that you say made you feel frightened, because there's a lot of people see things.
I went to bed that night and I was scared this thing was going to come back and all sorts of. I mean, this was the era of
seen Vulcans. You'd seen, I mean, to a child, the Vulcan going over. I mean, they were loud, weren't they? This thing's silent.
Yeah. I mean, Vulcans used to regularly fly over our house, and as I say, we were close to Cottesmore as well, which had at the time the big Beverley transports and the Argosies, the twin boom big aircraft. Harriers, they were always flying around from down at Wittering. And as I say, it just, I don't know what it was. I've no idea. I wouldn't like to hazard a guess, but it was certainly strange.
Fabulous. And Lorraine put a question up, didn't she? Right, thanks, Lorraine.
Yeah, I think it's related to the case. So I think it's related to the stakeout thing. So we'll put that
right. I didn't. I should have read it. So yeah, then.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, just save that one for later, Lorraine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Lorraine.
Yeah.
So after that, obviously, you've had this sighting. you don't really know that you've got an interest, but that's what's stirred the interest.
I think, round about that age, I was reading all the sort of usual sort of comics that were out, 2000 AD. We were watching all the sort of sci-fi programs that were on the telly, UFO, Star Trek.
What cases have you followed over years then, Andy? Actual UFO cases such as Rendlesham, Roswell?
Most of the major ones, sort of, as I say, Rendlesham, because my uncle was based down at RAF Woodbridge.
Right.
He was a quality control sergeant in the US Air Force. And when I was about 15, I think when I was 15, I went down there and spent a couple of weekends down there, and 16 also, just before I sort of left school.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great place. Just like being in America.
Yeah.
Obviously, that was pre the Rendlesham incident.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Did you end up in the forest or anything, or any? Well, you wouldn't have had any experience.
Yeah, we used to go for walks, of an evening or whatever. But a lot of the time, you weren't allowed off camp because obviously, they had their own sort of military police that were there, and once you were on, you were on.
Yeah,
I mean, everything about the airbase. They had their own shops, their own pubs. They drove on the right-hand side of the road. Everything was shipped in. So you went into their supermarket. It was all Dr. Peppers and all the sort of crap that they sort of have.
Yeah.
Barbecues everywhere.
So you saw that in 1973, 74.
Yeah.
You've followed the subject pretty much. I don't mean avidly, but you've just followed it ever since.
Yeah.
Have you noticed a change? Have you noticed a change in the way people describe them, or the descriptions, or the explanations?
I think if you're talking with regard to sort of what I call UFOs, I mean, obviously, when I was a kid and a young teenager, everything was flying saucers. There were discs. Now it then went into the era of sort of black triangles, and now it's gone into tic tacs, and it's just evolving, isn't it? I don't.
Yeah. I don't expect you to have an answer to this, but why do you think that is? Does that tell us then that it's military tech that's evolving? Because suddenly, surely
I'm not a big believer in it being military tech.
No, well, what I'm meaning, Andy, it's surely if the flying saucers that people used to see and the little glass dome on the top, and we're not seeing them no more. Surely that's not just stopped. I'm not a believer in military tech, but I'm just sort of throwing it out there at you.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, whether it's people's perceptions of what they think they're going to see, and that correlates with what they're actually seeing. Because, most sort of UFO sightings are sort of darkness, aren't they?
Yeah.
Daylight sightings are very, very sort of rare-ish.
Yeah, and reminds me again, I've got a daylight sighting to follow up of 2 typhoons chasing a silver cylindrical object, and I've still not phoned the guy, so I'll have to do that.
Yeah, it went through the sort of era of being silver cylinders, didn't it?
Yeah,
from sort of flying saucers to silver cylinders to,
and the explanations, weather balloons, strange atmospherics, and we seem to have moved away from that. We had a period where it were all Chinese lanterns. We've moved away from what's latest explanations, Chris? Do you know?
Anything they can come up with, pretty much.
Yeah.
But no, I think I don't know. I'm the opposite with the military thing. I think most of it is military.
Do you really?
I don't know. My theory is that people say after the Roswell crash in 1947, they recovered alien technology which they reverse engineered. But where is this reverse engineering? You only have to look at the US military now. Any outbreak around the world, and what gets sent there? A U-2 spy plane, which is still using a 1940s turbofan engine. It's not using a warp drive or.
Yeah, I think the problem is compartmentalization of it, because you wouldn't, any of the military tech that's relatively new, let's say, I don't know, 15 years. We are not even going to hear about it. There will be no access to the public.
Well, quite possibly. The latest is sort of like the Aurora, isn't it? The SR-91 or 73, whatever it was called. There was evidence of this pulse ramjet being sort of recorded across Florida, wasn't there? And that was sort of was that the 90s, early 2000s, something like that.
Yeah, I just think if you've recovered, look, I mean, Mussolini was alleged to have recovered some UFO. So if you look at the time period that you're dealing with anywhere from 50 to 80 years, and the idea that we haven't reverse engineered anything that we've recovered. Now they've publicly now disclosed that they have recovered it, which is a step forward, I guess. We all kind of knew that they'd recovered craft. I guess the bigger question is, I think when you say that it's not military, I think the automatic assumption is that this is alien, and that's not what any of us are saying.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there doesn't appear to be an apparent usage of that alien technology. I mean, even things like the F-117 stealth fighters. Again, you know, they got all these facets on them to deflect radar, but they were still using what was basically a turbofan engine developed in the 1940s. Yeah,
I think it's military-wise. I think when you look at, you have to have a look at what they were using that military tech for, and there isn't anything that they're not dealing with anything. If you look at what America have got, they're the most advanced tech out there anyway. Arguably, you could argue the Russians have got some stuff, and China, but we're not at war with these people, despite what everybody says. They wouldn't be using that technology. They would be using it probably for surveillance. Reconnaissance, and also the guys, these craft we're seeing, the notion is that this is not military at all. This is the breakaway civilizations, the aerospace secret, this secret MJ majestic groups, that start back long time ago, decades ago, and more ever since then. Just basically a separate government.
I mean, it was like I'm sort of fairly interested in what went on at Macnaharish up on the west coast of Scotland.
Yeah,
I mean, because there's some guys reported seeing something in a hangar there that didn't have any visible connection with the hangar floor. It just seemed to be. I mean, whether these guys are making it up or not, I don't know.
Well, that's similar to one of the guys.
Isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. There's allegedly some underground bases there as well, where there's.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the longest runways
in the UK.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I mean, along with sort of like Waddington and Scampton, the V bomber bases, they had big runways as well.
But if we're talking runways, then we're going to talk man-made tech, aren't we? I would think. I don't think a true UFO, in the sense that we're thinking of it, from some other civilization, would need a runway to land. I don't know.
I don't know, but as I say, I know there were some reports from some RAF guys I think they were on exercise up there. And one of them, he sort of walked past or had a view of these open hangar doors and saw this vehicle, shall we say, inside, which didn't appear to have any undercarriage. It was, for want of a better word, levitating inside the hangar.
That's
so, I don't know.
Fascinating. And just one thing before we kind of move on to a few more of your sightings stroke experiences, Andy. What do you think then to all the crashed UFOs that have allegedly been retrieved? Do you think the Trojan horses somehow, let's assume that they have actually crashed and it's another type of technology that's not man-made? I just don't get it why they'd crash when they get towards planet Earth.
I don't know. I mean, there was. Take, for example, Roswell, and I think the Kecksburg one. There was a terrific thunderstorm that night, wasn't there? On both occasions, like an electrical storm. I mean, was this craft or whatever it was disabled by the electrical storm?
Yeah, possibility, I suppose. Yeah.
I certainly believe there's something with Roswell, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, you look. I mean, they put it out, didn't they, across the media? We captured a flying disc. And 24 hours, or within 24 hours, it was no. Hang on a minute, it was a mogul weather balloon.
Yeah. Once again, another explanation.
I don't know. I mean, there was one was it in the 80s? The one at Aberystwyth or near Aberystwyth. I'm turning into you, Paul.
Yeah. Well, don't do that.
Telepathy.
I've had to have elocution lessons to get over that problem.
Where there was this wreckage scattered across this farmer's land, and then an RAF crash retrieval team went to sort of recover all these bits and bobs, and apparently spent 2 days recovering all the bits of metalwork and whatever from the fields. But I think it was Mark Ollie that did a sort of short documentary on it.
Yeah, that's right.
And he was saying that one of this honeycomb material, one of the pieces that was recovered, had a serial number on it. Well, to me, automatically that rings alarm bells, because you would think,
Man-made, yeah.
why would somebody from the Pleiades system or whatever have a serial number on it? And it'd be painted in a matte olive green paint on the inside.
And it's
expects to
implying
be a
that,
military, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Was that the Berwyn Mountains one? Was it that?
The Berwyn one was pretty strange, wasn't it? Because that again, people saw what they thought was something falling to Earth, either a bolide meteor or something, which allegedly crashed, on, was it Cad Berwyn? I think it was.
They were an earth tremor, weren't they?
Within 12 hours, the military were all around. Was it Llandrillo, the village there? And
you're better than me, Andy. You're getting all these words correct. I don't say them.
Yeah, Llandrillo.
Yeah.
There was the nurse, wasn't there, that thought it was a crashed aircraft that took her to her first aid trained daughters to go up onto the hillside to see if she could offer assistance. She claimed she saw this real big glowing orb on the mountainside.
On the mountainside, yeah.
I don't know, but it coincides with wasn't there a seismic recording where people
there was, that's right, yeah. So that were recorded. So one thing conflicts with another, doesn't it? But
it does, yeah. I read another report that some guy, he was a meteorologist, he reckoned that it was a big meteor that had actually crashed, which had caused the earth tremor. I mean, there's various sort of explanations, but you've got to ask, why were the military there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's same as the explanations for the Rendlesham Forest, the lighthouse.
Yeah, well, I'm a bit tenuous on Rendlesham. I think if it was what they say it was, where was the response? If you know what I mean, other than from the base itself.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've potentially got a nuclear armed base and you've got a vehicle, a aircraft that's flying around that base and over that base, why didn't the RAF, because obviously the American military can't sort of police our skies.
No.
Why didn't the RAF intercept this object? I don't know. It's contentious, isn't it?
Though it's a good point.
I mean, the local bobbies. I mean, I've read the reports from the Suffolk police, and I think on the evening that, I think it was when Penistone, Cabanas and who was the other one? Can't think of his name. When they went into Burrows on the first evening, I think the local police were called. They went, didn't see a thing, were automatically rerouted to an alarm at a village post office.
Right. So what does that tell us? Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
What does that tell you? I mean, the following day after the landing, I think Suffolk Constabulary also went to the alleged landing site, and the officers that attended said it was rabbits that had been digging in the soil. There was no indentations there, or no, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there. It'd be wrong for me to. I look at things in the cold light of day, and I look at facts. I've listened to Colonel Holt's tape recording, and it lasts, is it about 18 minutes, 16 minutes, something like that?
Yeah.
And it's only in the last sort of 3 minutes, they're talking about Geiger counters and whatever else, and, tree damage and this indentation. And it's only in the last sort of 3 minutes that he sort of mentioned seeing the lights in the distance through the trees.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And it doesn't escalate it any more than that. He says he thinks it's moving towards them, and he describes it as a red light. And I think when you listen to the tapes, one of the guys that was with him said, "No, sir, it's yellow." So he contradicts what he's saying. I don't know. I wasn't there. I would love to have been there. No, so it'd probably be wrong to, But my thing with Rendlesham is, where was the response? If this was, potentially thought it was a crashed aircraft to begin with. Then they thought it was possibly insurgents that were attempting to attack or whatever the base. Surely, if that was the case, at the height of the Cold War, and all the sort of, the Irish troubles and everything else, where was the response from outside of the base?
It's a great way of working it out. No, it's good.
It's something, isn't it? I mean, they obviously saw something. But what it was, I don't know. I wouldn't hazard a guess. And I think also at the same time, wasn't the one of the Russian Soyuz spacecraft breaking up over
entering the atmosphere? Yeah,
yeah, and people were reporting that.
So there's so many variables and so many things that it could lead
I mean,
towards.
I think it's going to be one of these things that's, it's what it is and it's what it was. You can only take their sort of admissions on it on face value, and whatever you interpret it in your own way. Some people say, yeah, it was an alien craft that crashed, but if you were an alien craft as well and you wanted to visit a nuclear base, why would you land half a mile away in the middle of a fir forest? Why not just land on the runway?
Andy's just killing Rendlesham, Chris. He's just killing it. I like the lateral, the just straightforward thinking.
I think you've got. I mean, the trouble with me is, as a police officer, I've always dealt with fact. And I've never, when I've heard two stories, when I've been to domestic disputes, whatever. I was always told you don't take anything on face value. Always question it, because there are two sides to a story. And the story that you might first hear, that you might seem plausible and acceptable, may be complete and utter.
Just somebody who's a good liar. Yeah. Where do you want to go now, Chris?
Well, generally, just before we end that, the problem I have with Rendlesham is that even the mundane explanations don't stand up either. So that's what they've done. So they've used some very mundane excuses to sort of excuse this away and explain it away, and they have never stood up. So I think it works both ways. But as you say, we're just. The rumor is, with disclosure over here, is that Rendlesham is going to be one of the key cases that they do disclose about. That's allegedly the rumor. Now, it could well be just because it's the most known case.
I mean, it's like Rendlesham going back though into was it 63 or 67, something like that. The original Rendlesham UFO thing, when vampire night fighters were sent up to intercept this thing that was actually correlated on 3 radar stations. But nobody mentions that. I mean, the apparently the radar traces at Rendlesham as we know it today was sort of non-existent, or allegedly non-existent. Well, nothing was detected on radar.
Well, that's interesting because there's a guy who lives in Beeford. So, you know where Beeford is, Andy, 6 miles from me. And he worked at the British base. Was it Watton? I might have got the name wrong. Somebody correct me.
Watton is down there, yeah.
Yeah, we're very close, yeah. And a few days after the incident, two American cars came on the base. I think he said they were blue and cream or blue and white. Not military personnel, men in suits came and took the tapes and asked them. Yeah. I've spoke to this guy face to face, and that's interesting in itself.
It is, yeah.
I tried to get him.
I don't think it's one of those cases, isn't it? I don't think we will ever know the reality to it.
No.
I think you're right. Story that, yes, I think they did see something anomalous in the woods. Whether that, I mean, there was some suggestion that it was a local nightclub and it was a laser show that was going. Was it Grab a Granny Night or something crazy?
I don't know.
Yeah, there's one of the local or I don't know whether it was actually in Rendlesham or whatever. There was a nightclub or something, and they used to have these laser shows that flick lasers all around the sky.
I suppose, if you've not seen them, there's at Osgoby, a few miles from here, they have a circus every year there. And when you get a low cloud base and they put lasers up into the sky, you can see these lights in clouds and that. And if you've never seen it, you think you're looking at something.
It's weird because, Louise and I, when she used to live in Morton, the village just outside Gainsborough, we were exercising her dog one night, taking it for a walk. And there was a similar circus at Scunthorpe, across in Humberside. And they'd obviously got one of these laser shows. And as you said, there was a low cloud and there was just these, we thought, what the hell is that?
Yeah, visitation.
And then, you sort of realize that it's lasers playing on the clouds, but
absolutely
really, really weird. And I mean, if you saw something like that playing through, a planted fir forest, I don't know. Absolutely. I don't know. It's don't listen to me. I've got my theories, but my main one is, where was the response?
Yeah, well, I think your theories are as valid as anybody's because none of us really know unless you were there. Where do you want to go next, Chris?
Let's just go chronologically through Andy's experiences, I think.
Okay, then. So, where did the big cat sighting come into all of this?
That came in. That was after I'd retired. That was in 2005.
So, we'll be led
So
by you.
I retired in 2000.
Okay.
So if you want to do it chronologically, I think the first thing that was on the short was the alleged werewolf.
Oh, okay. So the firearms incident came after that, did it?
You were definitely a werewolf, Andy. It's not alleged. Stop spoiling it.
All right, then it was a werewolf.
Right. Well, let's start with that because I think everybody after watching this short,
I'll call it a dog man.
after the short, I think people just want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that was the first thing. The firearms exercise, it's going back such a long time ago, and my memory is just terrible these days. That would have been, again, mid-80s, I think.
Okay.
That was probably before then.
Right,
and that was, as I say, the task force unit that I worked on, we were basically the force's elite, for want of a better word. We were firearms trained. We were level 1 PSU trained, which is, sort of like riot cops, that sort of thing. Everything else, we were involved in most of the major investigations, counter-terrorism work, major crime inquiries, all the murder inquiries, everything like that we worked on. So anything that was above and beyond sort of normal police work is what we were engaged in.
Okay, thank you.
And I say we were firearms trained, and part of that was that every so often you had to do like a qualifier for your competency with your firearms, and also various sort of scenarios and exercises, training exercises, which were mainly sort of observational exercises. This particular one, we were at an isolated abandoned farmhouse out at a place called Langworth by Ragby, which is sort of at the base of the Wolds. And we think we saw a ghost. Basically, the scenario was that there'd been an armed robbery at a local post office. The local farmer to where whose land this farmhouse was on had seen this suspicious vehicle, which correlated with the vehicle that was seen driving away from the post office, blah, 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 blah. Our job was to go and contain the farmhouse and deal with it accordingly. We surrounded the farmhouse around 10 in the morning, and the exercise lasted till about 4:30 in the afternoon. Myself and the colleague that I was with, we were at the front of the property, close to the entrance driveway in a dyke, in what we used to call soft cover. We were about 120 yards from the building, 100 yards, 120 yards from the building. We had a system which identified where suspects were, quite a simple system. I don't really want to sort of go into that, but it let everybody surrounding the property know where the suspects were at any one time. You could identify if they were in a doorway, window, which doorway they'd come out of. After about 2 hours, my colleague, he was watching the building through binoculars, said, I've got a second suspect in one of the upper windows at the front of the building. So we called it into the TAC advisor and said, noted, we've got a second suspect in the building. So not only is the guy that was the suspected armed robber, we've also found another one. And as I think I said to you earlier, Paul, when we ended these exercises, ordinarily, if you hadn't been watching, you'd go in and have a bit of a fun time and arrest the suspect. You're doing, like an armed arrest of the suspect. And you'd be walking them away from the building, the vehicle, whatever. And if you hadn't been watching, somebody would pop up behind you and give you 2 rounds from a sawn-off and say, look, lads, you haven't been watching. Bang, bang, you're dead. Sorry.
Mm.
So this particular day, we called an end to the exercise, and that was it. We went in and we said, we asked where the other instructor was. And they said, no, I'm the instructor that was carrying out the exercise said, there's just me here. There's nobody else. I'm on my own. And we said, well, we've seen, this person moving from room to room upstairs, appearing at one window, appearing at another window, sitting down in front of the window, moving through the room and going out the doorway in the building, onto the landing or whatever. You could see that much. And we did a tactical search of the building. And bearing in mind, nobody could get out of the building in the first place without being seen or observed. And there was nobody there, just nobody.
Well,
so I don't know what we saw or who we saw, but we both independently saw this person on the second floor or the upper floor of this farmhouse.
And did you see him through binoculars as well?
Yeah.
And,
really strange, creepy as well. And hasten to add, I think I told you earlier, they didn't use this building anymore for exercises.
Really? So when you told your superiors that, then what? Or didn't you go into detail?
We did this tactical search of the building. I mean, we absolutely took this place apart. Cellars, attics, everywhere. There was nowhere for anybody to hide themselves, and there was nobody in that building other than the instructor that was sort of carrying out the exercise. Yes.
So superiors above you, what did they conclude after that? Did they say you must have been mistaken?
I don't know whether it was mentioned to them or not.
No,
I mean, it was just sort of kept within the exercise as such. But yeah, it was strange.
It's interesting.
I can't explain what it was. There was somebody in that building. We saw somebody on the upper floors, and it wasn't just somebody stood at the window. They were moving.
Yeah.
They would move in front of the window, and there was one window where you could see sort of like the landing doorway or the doorway onto the landing, and you could see them walk out onto the onto the landing, and then they would appear in another room. Weird. I don't know whether it was a trick of the light or what. I don't know. I can't say what it was. All I can say is at the end of the day, we searched that place and there was nobody there.
Right. Wow. Interesting. What do you think, Chris? Ghosts? We don't do ghosts a lot, do we? But if that's what we'd call it, it's interesting.
Well, yeah, but it's surprising how many. I suppose they're the most common of all paranormal phenomena, I would imagine, because a lot of people, when you get talking about what we do, whether most people, I would say, definitely, I'd say more than 50% of people I speak to have said, yeah, I know. I've seen a ghost or I know someone that has. So
I've known a lot of guys on the force that have seen things they can't explain.
They consider to be a ghost.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, one of my sites when I was based at Lincoln, the upper part around the cathedral and the castle is very old. It's sort of medieval and Roman and whatever else. I was in the office this particular evening, and one of my sergeants, he was an ex-Marine, real hard case, real short. He was quite short for a policeman in those days because you had to be, I think it was a minimum of, was it 5'8" or something?
Okay. And
he was pretty short. I mean, now they're all sizes, aren't they? They don't care. If they're 4-foot midgets they're in, it's But well-hard guy, really, really well-hard guy. I mean, I say ex-Marine, he was an ex-sergeant in the Marines. He was, he frightened of nothing. And he came running into the nick, and he was as white as a sheet. He was crying, he was shaking, he was in a right mess. And eventually, from what I understand, when he calmed down, he apparently had been up on the west side of the cathedral. And he was walking through Castle Square. I don't know whether you've ever been to Lincoln. There's a place called Castle Square. The castle sort of like fronts the cathedral, and it's surrounded by sort of like Tudor buildings. And it was snowing at the time, and he'd seen a woman in a ball gown walk through the archway into the west front of the cathedral. And this was about 2 a.m. on a weekday. I think it was a Tuesday night or something like that. So there's no nightclubs or anything open. Followed this woman through into the forefront of the cathedral, and he was shouting to, excuse me, miss, can I have a word with you? Can I have a word with you? Kept following her, kept getting closer. And from what I gather, he happened to look down and saw there were no footprints in the snow. And then this woman, from what he said, just turned right and disappeared through the wall of the bishop's palace. And it sent him a bit doolally.
Really? What? Took him a while to get over that?
Oh yeah. He was off work for about, I won't say his name, but I think he was off work for about 2 months. He had a bit of a breakdown over it. It really did, mess with his head.
I suppose it would do. Chris, did you see this will relate to what we're talking about. Did you see the short I sent you today, or did you not have time to look at it?
No, but the link were broke, by the way. Sorry, I meant to. Yeah.
I could tell you loads of them. There was a guy, the Nick I worked at. There was a guy that was the caretaker there. He was a civilian caretaker, and he died. He had a stroke, I think it was. I can't remember what it was. This was after I left. He died, and one of the guys came over from Market Raisin, which is up on the Wolds, to do something, and he went into the gym, which was at the bottom part of the thing, and he bumped into this guy, and he says to him, "Oh, hello, so and so. How are you?" Because he hadn't seen him in a long time, and he says, "This guy just ignored me," and he went back into the nick, and he said, "What's up with Thingy?" I won't say his name. It was his name was Smithy. He says, "What's up with Smithy?" And they said, "What do you mean, what's up with Smithy?" And he says, "Well, I've just seen him in the gym. The miserable B has just ignored me. I've said hello to him, asked him how he is, and he's just walked straight past me without uttering a word. Right, miserable look on his face." And he said, "But he died 3 months ago." And apparently this guy that saw him, he had a bit of a wobble as well.
Yeah, you would do.
He said he was as solid as you and I.
Mm.
He wasn't wispy or translucent or anything like that. He said he was as solid as him. Yeah. And he didn't know that this guy had passed away. And he thought he was just being rude or more colourful words than that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, they do say that about a lot of ghost sightings, that it's not the usual what's the word? It's not the usual description. A lot of us, like you said, it wasn't the wispy, it wasn't a light, it wasn't just some anomalous shape. A lot of these are full-bodied apparitions that you.
Yeah, well, Louise, my wife, she's sensitive to spirit, and when she sees them, she said they're just like you and I. They're not.
Yeah,
they are just like normal people.
Just before we move on, then I sent Chris a short today. It just says links broke. I'll redo it tomorrow morning. And I went with a guy called Andy Barmby. He might be in chat. I don't know, because he said he were going to listen to look at a submarine below Speaking Cliffs a few days ago. And he's a rock angler. He's quite well known in area for what he does as regards fishing. And he's asked a lot of the anglers to give me reports of the strange and unusual UFO sightings, and he were talking about Burniston, which is just up the coast, and there's a place there called Sailor's Grave, which is a fitting name just to start with. He says it's a good mark for fishing. And one of his friends, I think he said last year, you have to sort of clamber down these cliffs. It's not a place that many people will frequent, and he'd been there a few hours in the night fishing, came off after fishing, turned round and looked down onto I'm not going to say beach because I don't know the area, but beach and rocks. He says, and there's a woman, all white, waving to him. He says, and he just can't believe what he's looking at. He's just, there's no other way down. There's only him being down there. And there's a woman. So wait for that one on shorts, guys, in chat, because it's not lengthy, but she's waving to him. And apparently there's a lot of sightings, not of the woman, but of ghostly apparitions down and around that area. And when you think about it, the names of places kind of give us the clue as well, because he said it's called Sailor's Grave, which is interesting. So just a little story there, guys, but so we'll hear it fully when we get it put up as a short. Where do you want to go, Chris?
Well, should we get to the prowler case?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Do you like that?
Yeah, the prowler.
The prowler. That was in 1988, December. I think it was early December. I think. Again, our unit, because of what we did, we were sort of tasked with doing sort of covert operations, covert obs, things like that. The lady in this particular farmhouse had been experiencing consistent prowling by whatever it was, for several months. Each time the local patrol car went down, obviously because of the location, Lincolnshire is quite a big place. By the time they'd got there, driven down the track to the farmhouse, whoever or whatever, I will say whoever it was, had disappeared. this was happening night after night after night. She was getting really, really distressed by it, really, really frightened by it. And of course, in those days, you know, we thought, I think she'd even had a panic alarm, one of our panic alarms put in. I won't go into too much detail, but, you know, should this happen, she could activate this panic alarm, and it took priority over other things. So there were steps in place to combat what was happening with her and try and detect, you know, who was doing it. I think the husband, as I say, I seem to think he worked away in Saudi or Kuwait, somewhere like that. He worked away. He was quite a prolific businessman and had connections within society, shall we say, with a certain group of gentlemen.
They shake hands in a particular way.
That shake hands in a particular way. He wasn't happy with the response that his wife, you know, although people had attended and tried to sort of sort this out, he wasn't happy with this, and I think made a complaint which got escalated to the chief constable. Various people got it in the neck, and as a result, my unit was tasked with going down there. I think we were planned to go down there for a series of nights, actually, based on previous happenings. So if it was like a Monday, Tuesday, we were going to go down there on a Monday, Tuesday, and then possibly go back later on, you know, the following Wednesday, Thursday, whatever. See if there was a pattern to this prowler. Yeah, we went down there. Nothing really happened, I think, apart from the third night when the lads inside the house heard something bang against or rattle against one of the doors. It was a still night, so it wasn't the weather or anything. As I say, the rest of us were located in outbuildings in the barn, which was across the courtyard from this property. We rushed around to the side of the building, and as I say, it was completely black. I mean, we got night vision goggles, but you can't run with night vision goggles. The night vision goggles we had then were these great big ex-military things that, you know, weighed a ton. You couldn't sort of run with those on your head and look at the same time. Very, very difficult. So obviously, I think we left them behind. We ran around there, nobody there, couldn't find anybody. We called the dog handler that we had on standby, and as I say, he picked up a scent trail from the property that led away from the neighbouring farmhouse across this field, and I think after half a mile or so, the dog just lost the scent, which in itself isn't unusual because dogs sometimes do lose scents. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's
so what did she describe then?
They'd heard tapping at the windows, stones being thrown at the windows, and the thing that sort of got her the most was this howling, which she described as being like a werewolf off of the films. She says it was this guttural, mournful howling.
And that's where
I don't know. I mean, we never heard it. You know, she had never recorded it or whatever. I mean, it's like anything, isn't it? You know, by the time something's happened, you've thought. I mean, in those days, we didn't even have mobile phones.
No.
I mean, our mobile phone we had was like a big car battery with a thing on that we took to major incidents. You know, with a pull-up aerial, and you stick a satellite dish up, and you know, so I don't think people had. Because I think there's been a lot of things in the comments about this one. Why didn't this woman take a picture? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't this happen? I mean, in those days, I mean, we're talking like the 1980s. The technology just wasn't there, and unless this woman had a dictaphone, and it probably wouldn't pick it up anyway, and she probably wouldn't even think of recording it.
They were genuinely very frightened, and
they were genuinely frightened. Yeah. The suggestion was that he was the son of a local farmer that got the hots for the daughter.
Right.
And it was him. And I think he was interviewed 2 or 3 times, but nothing could be sort of, how should we put it, attached to him. Yeah, pinned on him.
But we know you've said the dog could easily lose the scent trail. But so how far away were other farmhouse then from this one?
I think it was about a mile away, something like that, about three quarters of a mile away from this one.
Brave. I'm not saying that's not what it was.
In those days, you know, we didn't have thermal drones or anything like that you could send up. It was quite, you know, the equipment that we had.
Well, I think you've been as sort of clear and as concise as you can be. So I'm not trying to make it more of a mystery, but did it feel strange, or did the nature of what you were doing make it feel strange, or did it feel
strange? Yeah, because I think I said in the short, one of my colleagues, he turned up. I think it was the second night. We went down there the first night. He turned up on the second night, and he opened up his kit bag, and he'd got implements in there, should we say? And he was a down to earth again. He was a well-hard bloke. You know, he didn't fear anything, but I don't know, something upset him enough to think that, you know, he got this holy water from his local, you know, from the font in his local church, and various bits and bobs in his bag. I won't go into what they were, but
no.
Let's say if the average person in the street was caught with them, they'd be nicked.
Yeah.
And he said, there's something not right about this. He says, I know we're all having a laugh and a joke about this woman hearing this howling. He says, but this isn't. And he was a country lad as well. So he was brought up in a village and knew the country ways and whatever, did a lot of bush beating and, you know, a lot of shooting.
And it just didn't ring true for him.
Real down. And this just didn't ring true to him. He thought there was more to it than just a prowler.
Fascinating.
It just seems to me, Andy, that just logically looking at this, which obviously you do and have done, and obviously the Force did, but if this was that kid, by now, by the frequency of the visits of the regular police, uniformed and the cars, this kid pretty much knows that you're onto him, but persists in coming and keeps coming.
No, I think if it was him, this is if it was him, bearing in mind the location of the property, as I say, it was about half a mile from the main road, which was a fairly roughish track, so you couldn't get down there quickly. Mm-hmm. You know, even to drive down the track would probably take you 4 minutes from the main road. You know, he sees a car coming down the track, he's gone. You know, when we attended, we sort of, you know, we did it the way we used to do it, and we sort of secreted ourselves away, you know, fairly quietly and unknown. I mean, I think most of these happenings were really late at night, early mornings, and we'd gone down there and sort of got ourselves into place at sort of 7 at night. And as I say, secreted ourselves away. We were fairly adept at blending into the background in more ways than one.
Yeah, I mean, well, to put it another way, how many other cases like prowlers or stalkers had you attended, or places you attended where someone was howling at the top of their voice like a wolf? It just seems, I know you said it yourself.
I've been to a lot of prowlers, and I've been to, there was one that was at a residential care home in a village just north of the town here. They had a persistent prowler for many, many years. But again, that was bordering on, because there was, we went one night and one of the nurses said this guy had been banging, or somebody had been banging on the lounge window. And again, it was in the wintertime and it was fairly muddy, and there was a big border there, which was like soft mud, but there were no footprints or anything near this window. But that was a strange case as well, because I went one night and my sergeant went on the side. This was after I'd finished on task force and I was on the rural car. We went out there because the women thought there was an intruder in the building. They'd heard footsteps roaming around upstairs. All the residents or patients were tucked up in bed, doors were shut, and they persistently kept hearing these footsteps. Again, nobody there though.
No.
Just odd. Very
odd. Don't know. Because the building it was like an old Victorian sort of manor house, and it had this huge staircase which went up to galleries either side.
Right.
And they heard somebody walking around on these landings, on the galleries, but
I don't know.
Nobody there, and that was a bit bizarre. And we had dog handlers up there, and nothing. But I don't know. I mean, you read into that, or what you want.
The more dependent. Sorry, Chris, go on.
No, go on. I was just going to get to the happenings after, on the way home, because this. I mean, I would think that with my background, that the two incidents are connected.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Before Andy gets to that, I need to say that that's why me and Andy got talking in first place, and I knew nothing about what he's just told us. That's correct, Andy, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I didn't tell you the reason why I was sort of coming home that way, but
yeah,
I think it was the final night that we'd finished on the observations, because I think we were cancelled after that. We were planned. I think we were planned to go back the following week, but because nothing had happened and because of the man hours involved, they'd sort of knocked it on the head. And I think whoever or whatever it was on that third night would disturb them by, you know, emerging from where we were. And if it was this lad, he wasn't suspecting that we were there, if you know what I mean. And I think he sort of thought, oh, crap, you know, I'm going to get caught here. And it all ended after that. We didn't have any further problems. So whether our intervention resolved the matter, but it was more or less a happy ending, so to speak, from her point of view, because she had no further problems. But that evening, as I say, on this job, we were using pool cars, which were just ordinary cars, which, you know, we used to buy from auctions. You know, they're old battered Escorts or whatever else, Cortinas, Sierras, you know, anything, vans. They weren't police vehicles. They were just normal. Yeah, just to blend in. And we'd use these to go down to this farmhouse, and then we were taking them back to our force headquarters at Rendlesham, which is, I don't know, about 10, 15 miles from there. And we got there early hours of the morning, dumped these things off, and there was just me and one other lad that were travelling back to Gainsborough this particular evening, and we got back into our van, which was our normal marked police vehicle, like a riot truck, which we used to travel around with, carried all the kit and everything. And our route home took us along the A1500, which is an old Roman road called Tilbridge Lane, and that's between the A15 up near RAF Scampton and a village called Marton on the banks of the River Trent. There used to be a Roman port there years ago. So the A15, which goes past RAF Scampton, is a Roman road, and then this other Roman road called Tilbridge Lane went from there down to the River Trent. We were travelling down there, just chatting about nothing in particular. We got through the village of Sturton by Stowe, slowed down through the village, and we were heading up out of the village. And there's a slight incline, although it's a straight Roman road, it is sort of undulating. As we got towards this slight crest coming out of the village, this thing shot across the road in front of us from right to left, and it scared the hell out of me. It was a long, low, featureless object. It was like an elongated paracetamol, lozenge shaped. It was the width of our carriageway, because it's a two-way carriageway, one in each direction. As soon as it went across the road, my mate braked. We both sort of screamed, "What the hell was that?" but in more colourful terms. As soon as I saw this thing, and as soon as I was engulfed in, I have never been so frightened in my life. I don't know why. This thing just, I don't know. It just instilled you with fright. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I don't know what it was. I wish I knew what it was.
Featureless. I mean, nothing really.
It was, as I say, it was about 18 inches to 2 foot deep. It was about 18 inches to 2 foot above the carriageway. It wasn't connected with the carriageway in any way, and it seemed to have, I don't know. It seemed to have like fuzzy edges. There was no. That's probably the wrong word. There was no sort of definition to the edge of it, but it was opaque. And in the headlights, in the van's headlights, it was a light, sort of light grey to battleship grey. But it was.
I'm not ignoring you, Andy. I'm looking for picture. That's what I'm doing.
Scary as.
And it's strange that it had such an effect on you.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
The thing is,
I just don't know what it was.
No.
I mean, this thing, whatever it was, crossed the road quite quickly in front of us. It wasn't an animal. It was a still, crisp winter's night. There was no wind. It was frosty. It wasn't, as I think I've said before, it wasn't a sheet of polythene being blown across the road. It wasn't low-lying mist. It wasn't anything meteorological. It wasn't fog. I mean, I've seen all sorts of weird fog where it's just above hedgerows, below hedgerows, 6, 7 foot up in the air, and you drive underneath it. It wasn't fog. It wasn't anything being blown across the road. Whatever this thing was, it had its own locomotion.
Yeah.
And at the time of seeing it, we both had an uninterrupted view of it.
What about the other officer? He's just as frightened.
Yeah. I shouted to him. I said, stop, stop, stop. You know, and I won't say what he said, but he just put his foot down.
Yeah, yeah.
We drove a bit further up the road and we discussed sort of going back because we still had all the night vision goggles and stuff with us that we'd been using on this op down on the Notts border. We were just too, I don't know, it wasn't an option. It was, I don't know, I've never been so frightened in my life.
That's crazy.
It really freaked me. It really, really freaked me out.
So
within seconds, within a matter of seconds.
All these years later, I don't mean you still feel frightened, but do you still give you that kind of shiver?
Oh God, yeah. When I drive along that piece of road, yeah, I'm thinking, is it going to, you know? And I would love to know what it was. I would love for somebody to tell me what it was. You know, it wasn't an animal. I've seen every animal imaginable at the side of the road or crossing the road at night. You know, from deer to goat to pigs to flocks of geese flying across the road, badgers, rabbits. I've even seen a carpet of rats. That was a really strange thing. That was down near the sugar beet factory at Bardney, and it's just like a grey undulating carpet going across the road. Literally thousands and thousands of rats. Really weird.
Oh, good God. How many hours, you know where I'm going with this, and I know your views on this, but how many hours after the werewolf stakeout did you see this?
It was within, I mean, we were traveling time from the farmhouse stakeout to headquarters, which was 20 minutes, 25 minutes up to headquarters. We spent about 10 minutes up at headquarters having a bit of a debrief and a fag, and, you know, just before we drove off home, before we went separate ways. And from driving from headquarters to where this happened, probably 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
It's fascinating.
I personally, I don't think the two are connected.
No.
Not in any way, shape or form. As I say, what happened on the way home was seriously, seriously frightening. I've never known, I don't know what it was. I'm not going to say what it was. No, I can tell you what it wasn't. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't meteorological, and it wasn't something being blown across the road. And it was nothing, you know, it wasn't the headlights reflecting off anything.
Yeah. Do you want to touch on
what that leaves is up to you guys to, you know.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to touch on any sightings on that road in the years that followed?
As I say, the following morning when we got back to work, because I think we were on a late shift, we were working a 2 to 10 the following evening, and we told the lads about it, and they just, you know, they just fell about laughing, which, you know, and you don't want this ridicule.
No.
You know, we made notes of it in our pocketbooks and everything, and I even did a little sketch in my pocketbook of what we'd seen. I mean, we told our sergeant, and he fell about laughing, and, you know, which makes it all the worse for you because you've seen something that's really
very real and graphic and impacting on you.
And really, really disturbing, and they just didn't, you know, none of the lads on the unit took it seriously, and so of course you don't want to sort of tell anybody else for fear of ridicule. But I was, several years later, it was after I'd left task force, I'd done my stint on it, and I was on a rural patrol car then, and fairly frequently, sort of midweek, if you'd been on nights, used to sometimes come into the police station to have a brew and just chat, see if there's anything that they didn't want to put out over the sort of radio waves. Because in those days, we had all the local criminals used to have these receivers that used to listen to police airwaves, scanners, and so sometimes if there was bits of information you needed to pass on, they used to do it in person. And this particular night, I'd walked into the front office at Gainsborough Nick, and all the lasses in there, the civvy operators that answer the switchboard and whatever, they were talking about ghosts and ghost stories and asking if anybody had seen anything weird. And my sergeant at the time, he came through and they asked him, they said, have you ever seen, Sarge, anything weird? And he says, well, when I was on the patrol car, on the traffic car, which used to work 4 to midnight, he said, we were slightly late off because we'd been at an accident at Market Raisin, I think it was. He says, we were coming back along Tilbridge Lane. And he says, we'd just driven out of Sturton by Stowe. He says, when this thing crossed the road in front of us. And I thought, you're taking the pee. You really are. But he wasn't, as far as I didn't say anything to him. And I know he wasn't aware of what I saw, unless one of the other lads on the unit had told him, but I don't know.
He'd have let you in on jokes, surely.
I think so. Yeah. But he was quite honest, and he said both him and his crewmate were quite disturbed and frightened by this thing because they didn't know what it was. Wow. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Frightened me. Really frightened me.
Do you want?
I would love to know what it was. I mean, I could say, yeah, it's a UFO crossing the road, going through a portal, but was it a horde of Roman soldiers on the Roman road? Was it spiritual? I don't know. I just don't know. All I can say what it wasn't meteorological. It wasn't something being blown across the road, and it wasn't an animal.
No, it's fascinating.
But it was scary as.
And if he was on that,
it still makes me feel funny thinking about it now. Yeah. And I say every time I drive up that road, I mean, Louise and I, we sort of traverse that road quite regularly when we go to Lincoln. And if I come back at night when it's dark, I always drive, come that way home. There's sort of like 2 ways you can come back.
Wanting to see it now.
Wanting to see it, yeah.
Yeah, strange. So Andy, was it the fact that you saw it and couldn't explain it, or was it? Do you think this thing was a fear coming from this thing, or do you just think it was just the unknown?
I don't know, Chris. I think as soon as you saw, I mean, we both discussed it and we both felt the same. As soon as we saw this thing, and I mean, it was only about 40 yards in front of us, if that. And of course, we were traveling at, we were approaching it and accelerating towards it when this thing crossed. It wasn't a great distance away. It's just, I don't know. It was just as soon as it crossed the road, the hairs on the back of your neck stood up because it was. I don't know. It was just. I don't know. I can't explain it. It was just It was really, really frightening. I think it's the fact that you don't know what it was.
Yeah.
That you'd seen. If somebody said to you, "Oh, I've seen a big yellow triangle fly across the road in front of me," it's not in your normal, is it? It's
not something you're expecting, is it? No. And
it was, for want of a better word, it was paranormal. It wasn't normal. It was nothing normal. Yeah. Whatever this was beyond being a normal occurrence. I can't explain what it was. I can't tell you what it was. All I can tell you is what it wasn't. And it wasn't weather conditions. It wasn't, as I say, something being blown across the road, tarpaulin, sheet of polythene, whatever. Block of styrene, it wasn't an animal.
Oh, thanks.
It makes me feel funny thinking about it.
Do we have any questions, Chris? Do you know?
Yeah, go on, Lorraine. Put some questions up for us, please.
Are you okay with some questions here, Andy? Aren't you?
Lee Roscoe, Andy, you said it felt strange. Can you explain it in more detail?
If this is the farmhouse. We'd been briefed on what the lady had said. And I think a lot of us, like the first night, dismissed what she was saying, apart from the lad that later on came back with the, shall we say, accoutrements. It had, when you sat in a barn in the middle of December or beginning of December, freezing cold, and there's very little light. it's just whether it's just that normal human instinct to be, for want of a better word, afraid of the dark.
Yeah.
But that connected with the fact that you don't know what you're going to encounter. Even if you do come across this person, you don't know whether they're going to be armed with anything. All we had at the time with us, we didn't have a firearms with us. We just had batons and handcuffs and normal sort of restraints. You don't know what you're going to come up against. So yeah, there was a certain amount of in trepidation of what we're going to encounter if we ever encountered anything. But that mixed in, being in a sort of Victorian farmhouse derelict barn in the middle of nowhere with owls hooting and
the suggestion of a werewolf,
the suggestion that somebody is out there howling, and you still don't know. There's no confirmation of what it is or who it is.
Mm.
It was creepy. It had a creepy vibe to it. But then again, I've been in other places. I've done obs. I was left alone in a telephone exchange, and that's one of the worst places I've been to. We were having a lot of vehicle thefts, and this telephone exchange, it was like a 4-story building, looked out over this car park where a lot of motors were being nicked from. And you're there in the silence in the night, looking out the window, and all of a sudden, all the frames of the telephone exchange start rattling behind you, and
yeah.
So yeah, it's just
the way it is.
I don't know whether that was just human vibes that as I say, the darkness sort of instills upon you. I mean, you'll know from going up the cliffs, Paul.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The dark, things in the darkness. It's completely different to daylight, isn't it? You imagine.
It really is. It
I don't know whether you imagine it, but yeah.
Yeah, it takes on a different persona, doesn't it?
But
there are times, just like when you talked about Tilbridge Lane, there are times when there's a very genuine fear that's different to just thinking, oh, it's a bit spooky up here. You know what I mean? There are times. I don't know what that is that's impressing itself onto us. I really don't.
But Steve Colling, Andy, do you think the police today still frown upon these sightings, be it UFOs or cryptids?
I think there's always, because you're a professional body of people and you've got to remain pretty grounded. I think, I don't know, sometimes they take things seriously, sometimes they don't. And, to say to a bunch of hairy ass coppers, there's a ghost there or there's a UFO there, it doesn't generally happen.
Yeah, and I think do you think it depends on individual? I mean, I suppose
I think it depends on the individual, and
we've been up.
I've always been interested in this story, but what I saw on Tilbridge Lane that night, I never expected I would ever encounter or see anything like that. And I've had a few weird experiences, but nothing that has sort of instilled that amount of fear in me within seconds. Yeah. And I think it's, had we seen, a lady in a white dress walking across the road, I don't think it was just that I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
I can't say what it was. And I think it's the fact that it's the not knowing what it was that makes it frightening, because, there's something that's physical, that's there in front of you that you can't even describe it. It's not like a car going across the road or a horse and carriage or headless horseman, or it's this, whatever it was. I don't know what it was.
Strange shape, yeah.
I wish we'd had a dash cam or something like that in those days, because it would, it would have been.
Yeah, that'd have been great. So, can't read that. How long ago
are you signed to the Official Secrets Act? I think it's a lifetime thing, is it? But I don't really give a stuff.
Well, it's not really. well, you're not really giving any official secrets.
I'm not giving anything away. I haven't given any names away. I haven't given any locations away. No. I haven't given the names of my colleagues away. I mean, if people really wanted to know, I could give you all the names of the people I were with that will verify,
basically what you're saying.
Yeah, it's all recorded. It's all documented. The Patrick incident. There's that one in Wales.
Penturk incident, the Kaz Clark
that's one. That's the one near Cardiff, isn't it?
I don't know, to be honest.
Wasn't there a big military exercise on that night as well?
They say that I think they're trying to pass it off as military, and I'm not saying it's not.
Didn't the lady say she saw a lot of sort of C-130 Hercules flying around and Chinook helicopters?
Yeah.
Various other aircraft. I haven't sort of really looked into it, so I can't comment other than, you know, the bits and bobs that I've heard about it.
Yeah.
And I know that this lady said she saw, you know, various transport aircraft and transport helicopters flying around, but other than that, I'm sorry, I can't
Apparently
really.
they were Apache helicopters as well, I think. And
we do keep saying we'll follow up on that, so we really should at some point
have a word with her and see if we can get her on here. She can give the version of what she knows.
So, were there any reports of black triangles from any of your work colleagues? No, not that I'm aware of. There's a guy. Who was the guy that did the thingy? Starship TV.
Did what? Sorry?
Starship TV, was it? No, what was it? Starship.
No, I don't know.
Oh, that guy. He interviewed you, Paul, about UFOs.
Oh,
what's his name?
Yorkshire from Paul. The
Starship TV or something, isn't it?
Stargate TV.
No, what's his name?
What's his name?
Hell,
he investigated some black triangles over the Wolds in Lincolnshire, didn't he?
Been in court. Just
Richard D. Hall.
Richard D. Hall,
yeah. Richard D. Hall, yeah.
Yeah, Richard D. Hall. Rich Planet TV.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, Rich Planet TV.
Rich Planet TV. Yeah.
I know he had on one of his programs something to do with black triangles seen over the Wolds in Lincolnshire, and it was all to do with sort of sheep disappearances. But
that's correct. Yeah, and I think a lot of that was smuggling, though, weren't it? Not necessarily UFO related. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, there was a lot of sort of like in this particular area. I seem to recall when I was working for the newspaper as a photographer, because we nearly went up there. There were, in fact, I think I sent you a picture, Paul. There were a lot of crop circles appeared.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I think, did I send you that photograph of me? I was going to a job at Skegness when I was working for the county council, when I was doing a photography job for them. As I was going up across the roads, you could see this crop circle on the hillside. And I stopped and sort of took a few snaps of it.
We may as well stay with that just for a moment. What's your views on crop circles? Do you think bulk of them are man-made?
I think the basic ones are the basic circles that were appearing. I think possibly not. I think a lot of the intricate ones that's around now, I think they are man-made. I think there's a group of lads down there that are in the Wiltshire Young Farmers Crop Circle Association or something that I don't know. Do
you think
the basic ones? I mean, there's various theories, isn't there, from this plasma vortex theory where they reckon it's like a mini tornado that comes down and sort of swirls and presses the corn down. I don't know. I'm
just curious.
So I can't really say, but I think the basic ones, I think there's probably something to it. I mean, I saw a video many, many years ago where somebody was just filming across the Wiltshire. I think it was somewhere down here, either Salisbury or somewhere like that.
This was the Eastfield UFO.
There was like two little discs, two spheres came down and were sort of whipping around this cornfield and laying the corn down. And
no, it's fascinating. I got to see one in Rudston. Would you know where Rudston is?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And nobody got to see it apart from the farmer, and he knew me and took me out to see it. And it were in the middle of nowhere, in between Staxton Wold and Rudston. You could see RAF base, but on condition that I didn't tell a lot of people while it were there, because he didn't want people trampling his crops down. Someone told me that was genuine.
I think these ones on the Wolds, a lot of those were in sort of out of the way places where members of the public, or there were no roads nearby, so nobody would actually see them.
Yeah,
which puts a different sort of edge to it, doesn't it? Because it
does.
Why would somebody create something, in the middle of nowhere that potentially nobody's going to view?
And corn, wheat, barley, it's pretty difficult not to leave a track in it to get to where you want to do this bit of work, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's another one of those subjects that we should follow up on it, because I think people will really be interested in that somewhere. I don't know who we would speak to.
I think there's something fascinating with corn circles, but I'd say I think a lot of the intricate ones that you see across the sun, where it's all front news page of the Sun and whatever, I think they're man-made.
Yeah, I tend to agree, but there's definitely I think there's definitely a real.
But the basic ones, just the basic circles.
Yeah. What do you think, guys in chat? Have you seen a crop circle yourself? Do you think we're on the level with them? Do you know that one at Wilsthorpe that I spoke to the farmer? Linny knows this farmer as well, and he told me an interesting thing that I thought some crop circle researchers might never have picked up on. It was pure chance for me, and I've told the story before. He said it were in bottom at field, corner at field, near main road, but there were an edge and you couldn't see it. And he talked about having this liver-coloured spaniel dog, and it were in footwell. I'm going to say footwell. I don't know. I've never been in a combine harvester, but it's in the combine harvester with him curled up. And as the head of the combine hit the crop circle, the dog just sat up and began to howl. Howl like that. He said there were no air conditioning and it became cold. He says, I passed through it. He says, and the head hit it, I don't know, what's that, 5-6 times. And each time the dog got up and howled. Straightforward, straight talking Yorkshireman, this fella, just told it as it happened. And I thought, are we onto something here? How high is a combined off the ground? Why is it cold? Should we be going with poles and seeing whether there's a difference in air temperature above where crop circles are? You know, it's interesting, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I find it fascinating. It's again, it's one of those. You know, will we ever know the answer to it? I don't know. Is it
Probably
ET? Is it phenomena? You know, is it weather phenomena? Or I don't know.
Which could be. Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
There were a series of. What, Chris? Sorry.
I said, well, we'll definitely follow up on that. Interestingly, something came up today on one of my news feeds about apparently a Japanese. I think it was a Japanese film crew filmed some lights creating a genuine crop circle.
Is this the one Andy's on about? Do you think?
I don't know. This is in the 90s. This Japanese film crew they just got lucky and caught this on film. So I don't know whether that's genuine. Like you say, there's so much these days. You just got to be really careful of. So yeah, interesting. Oh, just going back to that last question. Going back to Zaffod Beetlebox, I think said Huey Green heard the Roswell announcement on the radio.
Really?
Yeah, apparently. So yeah, I think that it's just. Well, let's see how far this alleged disclosure gets in America, and that's got to be one of the cases that they're going to fully disclose. Well, I should never say fully, should I? Because that's not going to happen. But you know what I mean. We might learn more about it.
Okay.
Steve Collin, seen one. Paul on my dad's farm when I was a teenager. I think he
did tell me about it. Yes, Steve. Yeah, and interesting. And this is the guy, Steve. No need to leave question on it, but this is the guy who sat on Willie Howe a few months ago and heard the noises below him. Fascinating. Me and Linny went up to Burial Mound and had a natter with him. Just quickly, just while Deb Shaw, Tom Waters awake, Margaret Webster, Steve Collin, obviously, Scotch Mist, Linny's in, Mrs. Linny probably, Mia Girl, and Tom Waters says Richard D. Hoare is just commenting on that. Yeah. Sorry, go
on. Steve Collin, Andy, get this one.
Yeah, I'd give it a cartridge full of SG. No, I don't know. Being firearms trained, it was a pretty serious, you know, whether you did or did not pull the trigger was it used to mess with your headspace. It was, I don't know.
Can you imagine if like you said, you'd have to have your head really level with that because it could be something. You know,
we used to have all this psychological sort of evaluations, and you know, the onus was that if you did ultimately, you know, discharge your firearm, you know, it was your responsibility, and you had to make sure that you were covered under the Criminal Justice Act for the actions that you took. I mean, if we saw a werewolf, I don't know whether you'd.
Don't know how would that go down.
Give it 4 rounds from a 357. I don't know. I did shoot a spider once on an exercise.
Oh, what? Sorry, spider.
A spider, yeah, with a blank. Yeah, I got bollocking for that.
Oh well, there you go.
Well, I like you say,
it was right in front of my nose. I mean, it was an exercise out on it was like a woodland search, and I'd run from the vehicle and dived into soft cover. And you know when something's in front of your eyes and it doesn't quite sort of register what it is. Well, I've got a horrible fear of spiders. And there was something sort of like this waving in front of my eyes, and I was sort of looking in the woods, and then your vision comes to, and there's this enormous wolf spider in front of me. I started going all sweaty and horrible. I thought,
just
he had a 350. He had a 357 blank.
Yeah. Was there no attempt to gather evidence? For example, recording the howling or seeing if there were scratches on the door? Why not?
We had a
Policeman
look
were
at the
inside.
hall.
It did.
Yeah, we had policemen. There were 2 officers inside the house at the time. Bearing in mind that they'd sort of been there from the early hours, you know, you start dozing off and all sorts of things. It's not as salubrious as you see on the telly. It's very mundane, very boring, very soul destroying. You know, you're sat in a comfy farmhouse where there's probably a crackling log fire, and it gets to 1 a.m. You start nodding off, and whether the lad, I'm not saying what they did or what they didn't do, but you know, I've been on obs where I've sort of thought, oh God, you know, you start. It's, as I say, it isn't the Sweeney.
No,
Yeah.
you know, I was just going to.
It ain't like it's portrayed on it. It bores the arse off you a lot of the time.
Yeah.
You know, when you're stuck somewhere for sort of 8 hours looking at the same spot or looking at the same window or the same doorway or the same vehicle, it really does grind on you.
What about the donuts, Andy? No.
Sorry?
Donuts.
Donuts.
No.
I love donuts. Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
staple of the British police, though.
Oh, yeah.
How did
Kebabs. Kebabs was our thing.
Kebabs was the staple. Yeah. Sounds about right. Lee Ross was asking, how did it start, Andy, in the first place at the farm? Well, it's just a general report, wasn't it?
Yeah, the lady, this had been happening before we were involved. It had been happening for 3, 4, 5, 6 months before us on a regular basis. Whoever was sort of disturbing her, shall we say, it was continual. Hence why we got involved in it, because it hadn't been resolved, and this lady was distressed, was frightened, concerned for the safety of her daughter, obviously. It never happened when the husband came home. I think from what we gathered, it was always, which would again suggest it was the lad from the local farm. I don't know. The husband certainly never experienced anything that the wife and the daughter had. It was always when he was away. So again, it points to being terrestrial, normal. I don't know.
Deb Shaw, does Andy know anything about the staged UFO crashes in primary schools in the UK between 2011 and 2013? Allegedly, there was some police involvement. I know you're retired by then, Andy, but have you ever heard anything about this?
By then. I've never heard of anything like that. I'll tell you one thing we did have, which I find interesting now, is particularly our force, all of our documentation were P forms. So like a statement form would be a P whatever.
Well,
an accident report would be a P whatever. We used to have a UFO reporting form for UFO sightings. And I think we got sort of rid of them mid-80s. But anybody saw anything, apparently this form would be filled in and sent off to the Home Office. Obviously for people like Mr. Pope to have a look at.
Yeah, so presumably there's going to be a pile of P forms somewhere from a lot of police.
Yeah, I don't know, because obviously, since I left, when I was in the force, everything was still, any records were still paper-based. I think it was only sort of mid-80s that we really sort of got into computerizing and recording things on computers. A lot of the documentation, I know that our Nick here, what was the garages, has now been turned into a paper store. So it's a huge building that's just literally filled full of documents.
Yeah, well,
and some poor God at some stage has got to go through and digitalize them all. But
well, there you go, Deb. Something for you. This.
No, I haven't. I
Freedom of
wasn't aware of
information.
anything like that. No,
absolutely. I want to get to. I'm aware that we've got 30 minutes left, and there's probably more questions. So don't let me stop them. But eyes here. I was just going to say I want to get to Dane's Dyke before we sort of close this.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Ian. I'm 100% convinced of what you, Paul, my wife, Philip Kinsella, saw or should I say experienced. There's something in it.
Yeah. Do you want to walk us into that then, and I'll fill a few gaps in, and then
shall I put this video up and then Andy tell us the story?
Yeah, is that okay, Andy?
Do you want to do that, Andy? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let me find that. Let's hope it plays.
My name is Andy Rawlins, and I'm a photojournalist. Over the past 26 years, I've been photographing and documenting editorial stories of all manner of things and people from all walks of life. However, it was whilst working on an unusual article in Dyke at Flamborough Head in East Yorkshire in the summer of 2024, with author and researcher Paul Sinclair, that I accidentally stumbled across an even more intriguing story. Whilst documenting the possibility that melanistic big cats are living in or around Dyke, Paul, myself, and in particular my wife Louise, experienced something that would take us on a completely different journey altogether. As well as a news story, I also like a good ghost story. And this relatively modern ghost story is one of the saddest that I've ever known. I didn't know you got that.
Yeah, you sent it me. Yeah, you sent it me.
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
it's very good.
Yeah, just for a bit of advice.
Yeah, so talk the audience through what's all that about. You know,
because I've always had an interest in big cats. I saw one myself in the winter of 2005, whilst returning home from Grantham. One evening, I'd been to visit my mum, who was dying at the time, and basically Louise and we were on this road near Gainsborough. It was a frosty night again. It's always a frosty night. I don't know why. We're driving really slowly around these bends, and as we got around this bend, there was what initially I thought was a fox sat in the road. And I said to Louise, she was sort of like dozing in the passenger seat. I said, "Quick! Oh, look, there's a fox there!" And within a split second, I thought, "God, that's not a fox, that's a cat." And there was a sandy coloured puma just sat in the road. We slowed and stopped about 20 yards from this cat. It was in sort of like a haunched position, ready to pounce on something in the dike or in the hedgerow. It turned and looked at us and then leapt. I don't know what it was after, a rabbit, hedgehog, I don't know, squirrel, whatever. I stopped. I got out the car. I ran to where this was, but I didn't see a thing. But yeah, sandy coloured. I don't know, puma, cougar, whatever you want to call it. About the size of a large Labrador, big long tail, round ears, squat face, big cat. But we've had a lot of them around Gainsborough. I mean, when I was in the force, just quickly, we recovered one of the ladies from the local hunt was exercising some horses in one of the forests one day. She was going down this ride. A big cat ran out in front of her, spooked the horse, threw her from the horse. Mrs. Parker, who owned the hunt, the Blankney Hunt, phoned in about this. Our unit went down there. We recovered some casts or some footprints, which we had cast by our Scenes of Crime lads. Sent them off to London Zoo, confirmed as being big cat, puma, cougar, leopard, that sort of thing.
Cool.
Late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, we had an awful lot of cat sightings around. I've got this here. That was our wildlife and liaison officer with two of the prints that again were sent to London Zoo. I think the title was this was in the Lincolnshire Echo, on the trail of the elusive beast.
Yeah.
And there's her with the two casts that were sent. Again, cougar, leopard, animal of that ilk. So they're out there without a question of doubt. You know, when people say, "Oh, you know, no such thing," they're there. They have naturalized themselves in the British countryside without a shadow of a doubt. And that was the reason for sort of being in Dyke. I'd looked at Paul's video on his sort of big cat sightings and some of the sheep kills around there. And Louise and I, one day, we wanted a day out by the seaside. And I said, never been to Dyke before in my life. I said to her, let's go to Dyke, let's have a walk around, see what it's like. I'd looked at it on Google Maps, seeing where it was. Basically, you know, went for a walk round. We walked around Dyke, and we were there's a bottom path in the Dyke that goes back towards the main road from a small bridge. We were walking along there, and we got to probably halfway along this pathway, and it didn't feel right. You know, people say, oh, you know, did you get a funny feeling or whatever? Louise, she can see spirit, talk to spirit, whatever, you know, believe what you want. She has an ability. I said to her when we got this particular spot in the thing, I said, it don't feel right here. And I sort of walked ahead of her. And she says, I'm just going to wait here a few minutes and just see, you know, if I can sort of pick up on anything. After a minute or two, she came running up the path towards me, which is up towards, there's like a culvert that goes under the road. And she was really, really frightened. And she says, did you hear that? I says, hear what? I said, I didn't hear anything. She says, that noise. And I said, no. And she described it like a horse snorting in quick succession, like 2 horse snorts. She says, you know how horse sort of goes,
yeah,
it's noise to me. I said, we climbed up onto the road because there's like an embankment. She didn't want to go back along the path because she was quite frightened and disturbed by this noise she'd heard. And all the time going home, she says, it sounded like a horse snorting. I said, do you think it could have been a deer or something, a deer ball? And she says, well, I don't know what that sounds like. So when we got home, I was Googling like deer balls. And they sound more or less like sheep, don't they? Or funny little calls they have. There's nothing like that. We then sort of Googled big cat noises, just probably out of stupidity. And apparently big cats don't purr, but they make this noise called chuffing. And if you Google it on, if you search for it on Google and put in big cat chuff, there's quite a few of these. And as soon as I played this, Louise, she freaked. She says, that's exactly what I heard. I said, oh, yeah, come off it now. She says, no, honestly, she says, that's what I heard. It sounded exactly, she says, it's making me go funny now. I told Paul, I think I contacted you the next day, because we went there. We weren't expecting to see anything or experience anything. We just went for a nice walk in Danes Dyke, walk up the beach, whatever. But Louise had heard this, what we now think is this big cat chuff. I told Paul, we went back, I think it was the following week. I think we met up with you in the Dyke. We took you to this spot. And I think Louise says, when we got to this particular area, she says, you know, there's someone here. There's someone with us.
This is aside from the big cat.
This is nothing to do with the big cat. Yeah, this is aside from this. She said, you know, there's an energy here. There's a spirit energy here. I didn't feel, again, I felt weird in this spot. Paul, I mean, I don't know whether you want to explain how you felt, because you became quite teary, didn't you?
I don't normally pick up on anything like that at all. And Louise were walking around with you, and I would behind you, I think, weren't I? And I said, I don't know why. I says, but I feel quite emotional here. And I mean, we've done loads of these live streams and done them on Truth Proof. I don't say that, but I did. I'm saying it now. And I said, I feel quite emotional, almost tearful. And then Louise started elaborating about what she could perceive. And so if you want
on this young woman being there, hadn't she?
Yeah, and then we'll fill in on other details because we've got time. So go on then.
But she didn't know what it was at that stage. She says, I've just got this, you know, this real sense of sadness, and this young woman. And there's something to do with that particular part of the Dyke.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we carried on, didn't we? And we were discussing big cats and whatever else. When we got in the car to leave, I think you drove out of the Dyke before us, and we sort of followed you out. She says, this woman's with us. You know, she's still with us. Her energy's still with us. But it was, as we drove out the drive, she says, she's fading. She says, I can't even see her now. She says, I could see her face before, but I can't see, you know, she's gone. And by the time we got to the main road, she'd said because Louise, we've been loads of places in the past, and shall we see, I know you gone about the hitchhiker effect. Wherever we've gone, you know, over the past sort of like 14 odd years we've been together, we've picked up spirit. Louise sits in circle, and you know, I mean, whether you believe this or not, you know, they pass these people or these energies over to wherever they go. I don't fully understand it, but we've been places, and we've had various sort of attachments, shall we say, lost souls that are needing to move on, and she's taken them to where she sits in circle, move them on.
Yeah.
This particular day, as I say, as we're driving out of the Dyke, she says this energy's gone. She's just faded. She's gone back to wherever she's from. She says, and I don't know why. It's like she needed my help, but she's gone. It later transpired, I think probably was it the following week. We were just at home one evening. She was sat in her art studio doing something, and she just broke down in tears. And all this information came through about this girl and about what had happened to her. And she says she's with me now. Louise was so distraught. I videoed it, but I won't play the video to it.
No.
But she came out with the name Rachel, that she was a young girl, and that she'd been murdered or accidentally killed, should we say. That a boyfriend, she'd become pregnant. A boyfriend had found out, she told him they'd had an argument, he'd pushed her, she'd fallen, banged her head. This didn't happen at Danes Dyke, but then he had taken her to Danes Dyke and basically dumped a body there.
Which is it's not something I.
But the weird thing later comes that when Louise was sitting in psychic circle, again this Rachel came through, and she says, I can't leave, I can't go because my baby's still there, because we didn't know this at the time. She says, my baby's still there. Various things happened, shall we say, within the sort of psychic community that she sort of what's the word that she sort of goes to. Basically the spirit of this child was recovered, and this Rachel moved on to wherever they go.
So can I add a little bit more meat to the bone of this story now? Because I don't pick up on these kind of things. So
can I just have the last thing? We went back. We just went back about 3 weeks after that. Went to the same place. Louise says, yeah, she's gone, but she felt very, very sick, and she was like gagging. And she says, I'm getting the energy of the guy that was there. She said he is still alive, and he's lived with the guilt of what he did, but he's still alive. And she says he dumped a body. He parked up there on the road, and he rolled her down the bank, or pushed her down the bank of the side of the Dyke. And she says, I can see him now. He's throwing up. She says there's vomit coming out of his nose. It's coming out of his mouth. He's crying. He's distraught. He's, the anguish of what he's done. She says he's so, he's just beside himself with what he's doing. Then we left, and then that's when your little pieces come in, which sort of put all the places in the, all the pieces into the jigsaw.
Well, I found it fascinating what Louise felt and experienced, and I don't know why I felt a bit emotional, but that's where it stopped for me. Then Philip Kinsella came to visit, and I said nothing to Philip Kinsella or the next person who I'll mention. So I'm trying to fit this in now. We've got 15 minutes. Philip came, and Ronnie, they came for a few days sort of to look at the area. We went all over the place, and great company, never said a word. Many people in chat will be aware that Philip is a psychic medium. Now, I don't care what people believe or don't want to believe. That occasionally people claim to do this, and they hit on facts. How it happens, I don't know, but he's good at what he does. I've not said a word, and we went to Danes Dyke. We go down the steps, and I'm thinking, what's going to happen here? And never said a word. And Philip had put me on the spot if I did. And we got to where that area was, and he went, he's pretty flamboyant, is Philip. And, oh, my God, I can feel sadness. Stay where you are, to Ron and myself. I've not said a word to him. Something's happened here. I'm filled with sadness. I feel emotional. Oh, my God, I'm picking up on it, he's saying. And he didn't pick up on a woman. He just picked up on a strange feeling, which was interesting. And then I connected him to you, didn't I? Passed your number on. And because I told him then, I said, I wanted to see whether anything happened when you come to this spot. So you had a conversation with him, and I don't know how that transpired because we've not spoken. But then, a few weeks later, I visited Danes Dyke with Linny, who comes to the cliff tops with us. And just like Louise, he doesn't profess to be a psychic medium, but he picks up on things. And, you know, anybody that's seen Ian, I don't know, what is he, 6'2", 18 stone, great big sort of brussant kind of guy, but, you know, doesn't take no prisoners when it comes to speaking his mind. Never said a word to him, and he's in here now. So if I had, he'll put me straight. He'll put everybody straight. He's walking along the path, and he stops, and he goes, "Something's happened here." And he'll not mind me saying, next thing, there's all tears in his eyes. Says, "I don't know what it is." He said, "I'm looking up there, up at the bank. That's the main road." He said, and it's started up there and it's come down here. And I don't want to go into too much detail because I want to get it as accurate as possible. And that's all I know. And I thought, wow, there's got to be something to this. I don't know whether people are picking up on, whether there's no spirit there and they're just picking up on the tracings of intense energy because something's happened many, many years ago. I don't know mechanisms of how it works. But Louise, I felt a bit emotional. Philip Kinsella, knew nothing about it. That happened. Linny, and on art, he'd no idea what had happened or where. And he went to that spot. And I'm not just going to say they were across on ground and that's where he stopped. I'm on about in that area.
It's weird, isn't it? I can't explain it. I mean, the thing is, though, since I've been with Louise, I've experienced an awful lot of things that the rational guy in the street just would poo-poo or can't explain. And I firmly believe that there is something else other than us.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and I mean, this with this girl, Rachel, it's like pieces of a jigsaw that's, you know, there's got to be something in it. I mean, I don't disbelieve what Louise has said to me. I believe her 100%. If she tells me she's seen somebody, she's seen somebody. If she's heard something, she's heard it. You know, I have no reason now from my experience of sort of being with her for the past 14 years to disbelieve anything that she says. To me, you know, whether you want to believe it, whether the audience wants to believe it, to me, it's genuine. And she can actually communicate with what has gone, should we say.
Yeah.
With Dane's Dyke, it's just, you know, of all places, I mean, you would think, you know, if you're going to go out there and make up a ghost story, you would think, oh, yeah, I've got an ancient Britain here, or, you know, I've got, you know.
We have a white lady.
Yeah, you know, Louise knew nothing of this before we went, and she's picked up on this sad young 20-year-old something woman that lost her life, you know, because she told her boyfriend she was pregnant. I mean, she's even described the car. I mean, she said it was a pale blue, metallic blue Capri. And I think Linny might sort of say otherwise, but I think he said it was a pale blue Cortina. Now, the similarities between... Yes, I have. The similarities between what Linny, I mean, I think the night we came up the cliffs, he spoke at length to Louise about it, and they both have got similar sort of, you know, picked up things that are similar, like the car, pale blue, you know, be it either a Cortina or a Capri from that era.
As a former police officer, has it got your detective head on? Has it got you wanting to dig deep?
Yeah. I mean, as I say, this is why I've started making this short film about it, because I find it so intriguing that all these people can't be wrong. You know, if it just been Louise on her own, I mean, although I believe her 100%, other people say, oh, yeah, she's just making this up. But there's sort of correlation there, isn't there? With other people not knowing. I mean, I don't profess to be psychic in any way, but since I've been with Louise, I think, you know, I've opened myself up to these things. I can go somewhere and I can feel that it's not right. I have seen and felt a couple of things, but I'm nowhere on the same level as her. But I didn't feel that area, you know, there was something not right with that area. There was an energy there. You could feel it. It's almost tangible. Like I say, you picked up on it. You became emotional.
Yeah, and I don't know, you know what I mean?
And again, we were looking for big cats, weren't we?
We weren't looking. And interestingly, though, as well, to jump to the cat, where she heard the noise is when I've been doing these shorts and talking about it. And I'll say, if it's anywhere, I think it's up there. I think that's where it's going to be. I mean, I weren't with you the day that you'd gone to Dane's Dyke and heard that. You know, when Louise had heard that noise, I weren't there. It were only afterwards when you wanted to tell me about it that, you know. So, yeah, it's fascinating. And I'm going to jump to Chris.
Fascinating. And I think, you know, there's more to it. And I think we need to sort of, you know, there's some odd bits I want to tie into it and more people that I need to speak to. To hopefully, as I say, to corroborate and correlate what Louise is telling me. But I have no reason to disbelieve what she's saying. But yeah.
Well, you know, we've got nearly 200 people in chat, and chances are nobody's going to have a clue about this in grand scheme of things. But are there any places that anybody could investigate, or at local archives, that would be of interest to you?
What we've picked up is, or what Louise has picked up on, is that this girl, she possibly came from a children's home. She didn't have a family as such. She was passed from pillar to post as a young kid. She believes that she came from the Cambridgeshire area. Now, I've gone into all the police archives and missing persons from Cambridgeshire. She's pinned the date down to 1977, I think it is.
Right.
And she believes she's got a feeling that she has a connection, or a possible connection, with Filey's, with Butlins at Filey. So whether she worked there and she met this guy that was a local guy, and she's also got the surname either Brown or Browning.
Okay. Interesting.
But
do we want you, Andy, when you complete the shot, do you think your wife will participate, or
yeah, I'm sure she would.
I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes. It's an amazing story.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because as I say, you go to places, and I mean, if you were gonna, for want of a better word, fabricate or an invented ghost story, you know, you go to Dyke, which is this ancient Neolithic, you know, Stone Age, Iron Age, Metal Age monument. You would want to make something up about, you know, guys in fur coats with spears and flint axes. Not a young woman, a pregnant young woman from the 1970s that was murdered because she was pregnant, or, you know, she died because she was pregnant to this guy.
It's fascinating.
I mean, it's fascinating to, you know, I find it, you know, it's so compelling. With the correlation from other people involved.
I mean, we've just kind of blown lid off that one now, haven't I? Because I'd lined a few more people up to take up, but they might, it'll always be doubt in my head now that they might have already watched this and think, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that Linny knew nothing about it. I knew.
Well, I think I've said to you, we're going to take Maureen, the psychic medium. She's not into social media or anything like that. She won't have an inkling that this is even happening. So it'll be interesting to see because she is, you know, she is fantastic.
Okay.
Really, really good with her trait and her abilities.
We've got 5 minutes left. Is there any questions, Chris, or is it a bit late?
There's a couple left, I think.
Okay, very good show tonight, guys. Jojo, thank you, Jojo.
Dragon Shoebearded again. Do you believe all these incidents are related in some way or another?
I don't personally know. No. I mean, I'm nearly 62 this year. Well, I'm 62 this year. I think, you know, in a lifetime to have several experiences, I think I've been pretty sort of fortunate. I mean, other people probably experience more than what I've experienced, but no, I don't think there's, you know, I'm interested in the genre, any genre. I mean, from UFOs to Bigfoot to, you know, lake monsters, anything like that. I mean, crop circles, it just fascinates me. But no, I don't think they're connected in any way.
No. Okay.
And big cats are real. They're not
mystical.
Oh, yeah,
I would.
Not alien. They're not alien. They're not mystical. They are there.
I'm still amazed we get comments so negative. They're not just denying it. They are adamant, aren't they? They count some of those comments. And I just can't understand how you can read hundreds of comments in a line about people's sightings and then draw the conclusion that nothing's happening. It's just
I've not seen
takes all sorts, I suppose. Yeah, just close minds, I guess. So I think it is. Sorry, Andy, go on.
No, it's all right. As I say, I just think these animals have naturalized themselves in the UK countryside.
Do you think it was after the Wildlife Act of '76 that they
when they were released?
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, people were releasing them left, right, and Chelsea, weren't they? And I mean, whether these are a hybrid that are bred with domestic cats, or I don't know.
There's a few reports from around Flamborough, of a cat about the size of a spaniel, a black cat, which is interesting. A bit smaller than what they usually.
You don't know, do you? Because I know I'm very interested in, just going off of the tangent, with the Scottish wildcats that live up in the Highlands. They're one of the most endangered species in the world, and they're trying to sort of neuter domestic cats up there because the proper wildcats are breeding with the domestic cats and watering the sort of bloodline down, which they don't want. So I mean, there's no reason why a young cougar, puma, leopard, whatever. I mean, I don't know what age they start breeding at. Whether they could sort of crossbreed with domestic animals.
There's some big cats in the main.
Big feral farm cats that are about, and I don't know, but big cats are there definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Collins saying this has been a superb show tonight, guys. Thanks to Andy. Tonight's guest. Can he come back on again, please? Well, hopefully, Andy, when you get an update on the Rachel case, we'll definitely come back on. And that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, there's I could tell you several sort of supernatural things, that's happened to me. I mean, I don't know. I could go on forever. I mean, I've actually been touched by a ghost, but I haven't sort of told many people about it. Yeah,
I think I've married one. Right, there's the Tilbridge Lane. Where is it? Can you see it, guys? I'm not very good at this. Just maybe no.
A little bit to your right.
You see it?
That's it.
You see the glow going across the road. Not as good as the painting that Andy did, because you painted it, didn't you, Andy?
I did, yeah. I don't know where that is at the moment. Somewhere.
Well, look, it took me half an hour to find it. God knows why, but there you go.
But as I say, my belief and in a lot of things is in fact. I like to deal in fact. I don't like to believe in theory or whatever. And everything I've sort of hopefully presented to you tonight, in some way, shape, or another, has been backed up by fact. As I say, all the police instances are all documented, recorded. If people don't believe me, they're quite willing to submit a freedom of information request to Lincolnshire Police if they want to search through these documents. I'm sure they're there because it's all documented.
Yeah,
the Rachel thing, I mean, obviously, I can't offer you any evidence other than sort of anecdotal reports from other people.
But it's great. It's
had that I believe 100% in Louise and her abilities, or her gift, whatever you want to call it. I mean, she has got this gift, this ability to. And I'll tell you now, there's some weird shit happened to us.
Well,
and hitchhiker effect, the amount of people that we've had in this house that aren't actually people that have come back with us from places,
it's definitely legitimate. Yeah, I know a few people with that same ability. It's definitely legit.
I mean, I think one of the last ones, I picked up an airman when I went fishing. I come home and the atmosphere in the house changed for a few days, and we were seeing things out the corner of our eyes, shadow figures, hearing noises, thumps, bangs, fleeting glimpses of things. She went to Maureen's, and Maureen told us, she says, "Oh, Andy's picked up this airman, and he crashed at so and so." And I actually looked into that, and it was a Hamden bomber pilot, and he had got hydraulic problems. He was out of RAF Skellingthorpe, I think it was, and he crashed near Eagle, near where I used to go fishing, or where I still go fishing. And Maureen had picked up on that. It's just, again, it's correlation. It's.
Looking forward to the Rachel.
A lot of things. Yeah, it's weird. I can't get my head around it. I still can't get my head around it, but I firmly believe in it.
Yeah, thank you. So, Chris, are we about wound down?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Karen, always a great supporter of the show. Really appreciate that, Karen. And it's time to wrap it up. So we'll see you. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you for
thanks guys. Thanks,
thank you
enjoyed being on.
Thanks to Lorraine for moderating again, and thanks to Paul for putting up with me. So,
no worries. It's all good.
We'll see you guys next week as usual on Tuesday, And we don't know what we're doing next week, Paul, do we?
We're talking to Mick Park, and Mick's going to share his experiences with and his views on the subject. He's probably more views than experiences, but he's interesting. Mick Park's the guy that we interviewed with Robbie Williams on Truth Proof last year.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be good to speak to Mick. Okay, so it's good night from myself. Good night, Andy.
Yeah, good night everybody. Good night, guys. Yep, speak soon.
Guys.
Bye-bye.